Zwölfter Gesang, Vers 101, Ufer eines roten Brodels. Lautes Schreien der gekochten Seelen, eingetaucht bis zu den Brauen.
Welcome to Hubris on Toast, formerly canonical as Feck, Feck even.
Wow, we just got an X rating apparently.
There we go. Number 2, which I have dubbed my head in pieces between the Tigris and Euphrates.
Ooh, nice.
Because this left my head in bits, and this is a bit of a mea culpa as well. So this, from my point of view, I don't know about Nick, and we'll see what he has to say about it. But from my point of view, this is going to be the shittest podcast I've ever done, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's got a lot of competition, but it's...
Yeah, we've put up... we definitely put out some stiff competition for worst podcast of all time.
Yeah, and I think it's apt that we've got the title change, Hubris on Toast, right on time, because this was the epitome of biting off more than you could chew, I think. And which so right, that kind of let me back up and explain here a little bit. So yes, we decided, so we did Gilgamesh. We started with Gilgamesh last time. That was all right, I thought. Not bad.
Yeah, well, in that we read 3 versions or so, or 4 or 5 versions of the same narrative piece, widely considered to be maybe the first long form narrative in human language, right?
Yes, and it was a gentle introduction into this kind of project where me and Nick try nothing less than to understand the entire history of humankind. Yes, why not? And so I thought we were,
well on our way. We hit our stride right out of the gate.
We were being reasonably kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Well, anyway, we thought, right, okay, let's go on to the wider world of Babylonia, Mesopotamia, and we thought we'd anchor it with 3 books, which are The Ancient Near East, a very short introduction by Amanda H. Podany, Babylon by Joe Notes. You have the revised editions. Oh wow, you also have lots of notes. And Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Her Stories and Hymns from Summer by Dean Wolkenstein and Samuel Noah Kramer. And these would be our 3 anchors. And we would read the 3, and we might, read around a little bit, and we would have it down.
Oh, yeah.
Summer, Arcadia, Babylon, all that good stuff.
It would be under our thumb.
Let's move on to Egypt next episode. No more need to be said.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm glad. It sounds as if, Nick, you might have had a similar experience to me. This was a fucking ridiculous idea, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, just for a moment, like, what are the dates we're talking about here? Right? Even just going back to the Mesopotamian chronology at the back of the Babylon Revised Edition, and we start at 2630 BC basically, and we go right through to 600 AD.
Yeah, and we didn't even touch
3,000 years of history.
And we didn't even touch in these 3 books. Really, there's not much about pre-deluge settlement and Nimrod and all that. So it clearly is hubris of the highest order, but to the point where I was like up late last night, like scribbling down notes and trying to make, because I thought, right, I at least I can maybe do some sort of, bullet point kind of I don't know, like a roadmap for maybe future episodes or something. But even getting things in the right order is. So I felt, if you remember, Nick, before we started, one of the reasons I wanted to start this project is because in my own spare time, I was trying to put together a timeline of just for my own amusement to hang on the wall, a timeline of all history with all the important bits, and then even just trying to figure out what you were going to look at before you looked at it in the right order. That's a task into itself. So then I thought, I know, I'll burden Nick with this as well, and then we'll do it together.
We could be Sisyphus together.
Yes, exactly. And even just this part of history, trying to put it into any sort of chronological order for future reference is a task.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I suppose we should say that. I mean, we start with Mesopotamia because it's the beginning of the written word, right? I mean, there is obviously history that goes before Mesopotamia, but this is really, I mean, we can go back to the cave paintings of Lascaux, and
we'll get to that.
Okay, perfect. But we did try to start at least with when people started to figure out how to write stuff down so that people could read it in the future, right? Beginning with kind of, go ahead.
No, to my earlier point that was the thing. So at a certain point when I was trying to go before trying to go all the way back, till the dawn of time and Big Bang, and then you think, well, even before that, what was before? Because there's theories. So so to actually kind of do it properly chronologically was a stupid idea. So that's one of the reasons we're starting here as well. Yeah, like you said, because we can backtrack later, but it seemed like a good starting point for at least something that wasn't, almost totally abstract, that we had something tangible to work with.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the word civilization is one of those hoary kind of, want to be careful about throwing that word around. But, I do think...
Which one, hoary or civilization?
Both. So I feel like... I do feel like...
I'm looking forward to when we get to researching the hoary civilization. That sounds like a fun period of time.
Yes, well, I mean, it was funny. We've been reading about Babylon, and so far I haven't come across the whore. But I'm fairly certain that she's important. Because
this is the other thing, right? Is interpretation. Obviously, if we were coming to this via the Bible, then we would have had a very different
lens for sure on
and we'll get to that as well, because it's not anyway.
Yes. So what I will say, what's really strikes me, and maybe my biggest takeaway from this is that in some ways, and I asked my wife about this, I said to Jennifer, why don't I know anything about Babylon? Like, why at the age of 47 am I really for the first time exploring and discovering things like who this pantheon of gods were, a variety of facts around the fact that it seems as though the first cities are Babylonian. The first writing is Babylonian. The first laws codified in any kind of meaningful way are Babylonian. This does seem to be the true cradle of human civilization, to use that word, right? Why am I discovering this now at 47? Why was I not taught this in elementary school? Jen said, there might have been this awesome gap for me that we didn't reach it in Irish history, and it had already been covered in the Canadian curriculum, because apparently it's covered at the very beginning of grade 8 when I was still in Ireland doing my first year of secondary school. I moved here, and so I kind of missed. So Jen was like, no, we did talk about this in school. And I was like, I never did. And I just assumed it was racism. I assumed it. Well, this is just racism. This is European, Eurocentric, folks who are like, no, 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 no. All of this stuff, we came up with all of this. We came up with writing. We came up with, and if we didn't, it was aliens, right? There's no way that people in South America or, so.
Another thing, as if there wasn't enough to deal with anyway, I sent you a link. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but basically about how there are kind of whole kind of huge arguments raging within the historical community, like about whether Sumerians kind of really existed at all or who they were. And then something that I didn't consider because this is so difficult and kind of problematic, and there's so much to deal with anyway, is this article. Did you read this article? I can't remember.
No, I saw it like an hour ago. I was like, I don't have time to look at this now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, feel free to summarize.
But it was one of the elements of it that they threw in that was kind of interesting was the whole thing about racism and particularly anti-Semitism being a part of just, we don't really want to assign this group of people with being, the kind of as the people who created, we want something a bit more, blue-eyed and golden haired, so that's kind of getting in the way as well. And I think you tend to forget this because you tend to think, or you hope, that most proper historians and archaeologists and people like that have all those things turned off, right? That they're just working totally objectively, that they're not bringing any of that crap to the table. But sadly, that doesn't necessarily seem to be, especially when you go further a bit back into maybe when a lot of this stuff was being dug up in the 19th century. And that's the other thing as well, is we forget because we've grown up with at least, 100 years of not much, but some physical artifacts and things being dug up to kind of confirm that these places actually existed. But prior to that, you're talking thousands of years of just little clues in other texts, like
from other
Herodotus,
the Bible,
the father of history, the father of liars, right?
Yes,
and all that. So yes, maybe we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much about it. But before we get into the other thing that was maddening for me was this. On the one hand, and we mentioned this a little bit off air, is on the one hand, after having now read these three books, the Gilgamesh books, and before that, I'd read some other books about Babylon. Despite all this and watching that, I still don't really have a idea in my head of like what Babylon or Mesopotamia looked like, what the people looked like, what they did from day to day. So it's very, very, very sparse.
Yes.
Which is what maybe led me to believe that we could figure it all out in the course of a single. But then on the other hand, it's so fragmented and there's actually quite a lot to look at. So it's both at the same time, which is, I don't quite know how that can be, but it's that, just either we give up and move on and let's talk about World War II next and forget everything in between.
Right.
Or we've got a whole lot more reading about specific things ahead of us, right? So, we'll... Do we accept the challenge or not?
I will say that of these three books, the one that I certainly enjoyed the most is this one. And I do think it's a story more than anything else is the thing that attracts me most to Andy. I feel like I understand this, a civilization or a people more through their story than really through anything else.
Right.
And so, when we read the Epic of Gilgamesh, I felt like I got a stronger sense I mean, we talked in the last episode about, yes, there's all kinds of questions around it, and it's highly fragmented, and it's, it's a continually evolving work that, they're figuring things out all of the time. But still, there's things in there that seem quintessentially human, and there are things that seem slightly alien or slightly, interestingly odd. And so the same when I came to reading this, I was like, oh yeah, this. So I mean, I don't know how much more of this there is. How many more of the myth cycles of Babylon exist in a kind of written down form. But I'm definitely excited to continue to explore that side of things. To some degree, I don't know, after having read this and the other one, that I need to read many more glosses of the 3,000 years of history.
We have to go deep, I think, if we're going to... Right. Because so many things... I mean, basically what this rubbish podcast, from my point of view, is going to consist of, maybe Nick will have something a bit more substantial, but it will be me just shouting out little scribbly notes that I made as I go along and going, what's that? Who the hell are these people? So if that's your idea of a good time, stick around.
So a madman with a shopping bag full of bits of paper approaches you on the street, and yells at you, "Who are these sea people?"
Yes, exactly.
What do they want?
It does fit our remit, because we said from the beginning, this, if you actually want to learn about this stuff, you go somewhere else, right? This is more about the process of learning, right? This is watching other people trying to learn something and see if that kind of gives you some consolation, because there's two men out there even stupider and less clued in than you are, so it should give you...
I mean, I don't know, did we front and center last in our first episode, when it was called a different name anyway, that neither of us has a background in history? I went to art school and then teacher school for a little while. I guess
I didn't go anywhere.
I do actually have a bit of a background in art history, I guess. I did some of a master's degree in art history. But that, even that's very piecemeal, right? You do a course in Byzantine art and architecture, you do a course in, the art and architecture of Indonesia. It's in no way comprehensive.
Right.
And so I
never
touched on Babylon.
We'll go through another name change. Episode 3 will be autodidactical as Feck, I guess. But
yes, there we go. Just change the name every time.
I think hubris on toast is probably kind of fits.
I think that'll stick.
I think so. Until I had a heart attack one night, banging my head against the wall, trying to figure out, exactly what the difference between an Akkadian and
a Sumerian and a Babylonian is. Yes, I have no idea how this all fits together.
No.
But again, it's fascinating to me that really that area around modern day Iraq, seems to have been such a fertile, place for the human race, right?
Right.
Things as simple as the fact that we have a 60-second minute and a 60-minute hour.
Right.
Come from Babylonia, come from ancient Mesopotamia. That's mad, and that's mad that I didn't know that.
Yes, I'm actually quite impressed. Obviously, Canada has a pretty good school, because you mentioned the fact that you don't know is just a kind of accident of timing, maybe, but your missus certainly was. But I'm pretty sure I was never taught about Mesopotamia when I was in school.
Right.
Pretty sure it didn't come up.
You must have done Egypt. You must have done. I mean, like Egypt. I feel like everyone does Egypt.
Yeah, I think we must have. The thing is, I have a bit of trouble really remembering what we learned, and I suppose that stuff would have been in primary school anyway, right? Before things were actually put into like categories where you just kind of learnt, and you had those series of books. What were those series of books called, where they were really, really tiny, thin books, like pocket books with hard covers, and one was like Joan of Arc, Marco Polo. Do you remember this series?
They sound like Ladybird books to me.
Yes, Ladybird maybe. And don't remember if there was a ladybird, Gilgamesh, or there was a ladybird.
Okay.
Hammurabi. I don't remember the ladybird.
Right.
I think you might be right. I think they might have been slightly Greco-Roman centric, right?
That's what it certainly feels like to me. I feel like, yeah. It's really, as I said, it was really illuminating in that way to just read and to realize how many features of modern life, right? I think it's as simple as a city, a city state, as a law, codified law. These things seem, I mean, that we're aware of anyway. I mean, again, we're constantly finding out things, but generally speaking, most historians seem to agree that this is the first place we have recorded documentary evidence of somebody writing down a set of laws, and laws that seemed in many ways, from my reading of this, to be quite progressive. Like, a lot of them seem to be about protecting the weak from those who had power, right? Or things like, I love the ones about how, like, if you went to somebody else's city and you got, robbed or whatever, that the city was kind of responsible. Like, they had to deal with it. Like, it was, you had to kind of make sure that your streets were safe for visitors and things like that. That was
right. But again, the other side of what we were saying earlier, that sometimes some of these things can be clouded by personal prejudice or things like that. There's also the other danger, I think, of some historians maybe, kind of reading a bit too much or giving a bit too much because now I think it's very in vogue to kind of what's the word I'm looking on, to kind of project onto earlier people's modern kind of thoughts and ideas that and more we shouldn't forget that you go back, you don't have to go back that far enough, and people were pretty fucking horrible, like not that long ago, right? Like, so
I think they still are, Clive.
Yeah, but even more so, right? Like at least now we might kind of, after doing something horrible, we might think, there was a certain point not that long ago where people would just do horrible shit and not give it a second thought, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
So I think the further back, so I don't think we should necessarily,
I mean, the book acknowledges that slavery exists, right? So
it's almost like that word.
Morphizing, yeah.
Thank you. That word. Animals in like animations and things, and stuff like it's almost like that when you like you write and I understand it's the difference between, this is a whole other, as if we haven't got enough to deal with, but it's sometimes it's accepted because it's the thing, like colorblind casting in Shakespeare, for example. I think that's entirely justified because those things have become like mythologies now, right? We've crossed over from history to mythology. So when people complain, you have a black Macbeth, you wouldn't have been a black Macbeth, you're thinking, no, it's because it's not history. It's a myth. It's fine, it's a story, So I don't have a problem with that, right? But then, of course, then if you were doing a serious piece of history, it wouldn't like, so if you were going to make a Hunger Games style YA adventure set in medieval times, and you have a kind of proto-feminist heroine at your center, that's perfectly fine if you're making a Hunger Games style adventure, right? Plus you have a character empowering young women and it's just set in a historical setting, it's fine. But if you were to make a serious history, you're not having sad as it is. Those characters didn't really exist. So I think there's a danger both ways, right? You can what I'm basically saying, Nick, is there's good people on both sides.
Oh yeah, well, yes.
Actually, I think that's fair to say. That's not a problem.
Yeah. Daddy Trump has taught us much. But
so let the shit podcasting commence. Let's go book by book, and because at least at the very least we might be able to offer a few book reviews.
Yes,
the very least, right?
Where are we going to start? We're going to start with.
I think we should start with.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
that one I have an E form, so I'll just shoot it up here.
So this is Amanda H. Podany's The Ancient Near East, a very short introduction from Oxford University Press. Part of the very short introduction series. In fact, for fuck's sake, 374. And I have a feeling we might be returning to this series.
Right.
Because they are pretty good.
Yeah, primers or primers. Or you say it.
Primer. I keep telling you, Nick, no one says primer. Only
interestingly enough, I actually bought 3 of the ones listed on the back of this.
Okay.
The Druids, the Celts, and the pre-Christian Ireland, because all of them fall well within my other interests.
I think you're going to say the Christians, the Celts, the pricks. The assholes.
You need to know about them. Yeah.
So the ancient, this one. So I chose this first because I think this probably is the best first one-stop shop, right?
Yes, I agree, and it's an easy read. Like it's comfortable, it's well written, it's smooth. There's lots of information in there, and it's not stodgy. You don't bog down in it at all.
No, and it was published. Let me see, 2014 as well. So it doesn't have the problem that maybe some other slightly more venerated books might have, that have just because this is still history that's still literally being dug up as we speak.
Yes,
it can change, from year to year. In fact, let me just jump ahead here and read, because I think this is valid for keeping in mind. This is from the other book, and I think this is worth making a note of, right? Sorry, this is slightly lengthy, but I think it's worth mentioning. The perceptive reader will have observed how difficult it is to classify the textual material discussed in this last chapter, a fact which emphasizes the cultural as well as chronological gap that separates us from the Babylonian world. He or she will have realized that we are forced by the limits of language as well as the habits of thought into an ethnocentric terminology that, as in the case of the economic, religious, and political institutions discussed in earlier chapters, tend to isolate concepts and institutions which in the Babylonian mind were inseparable. Such semantic problems obscure the real structure of Babylonian society, while our attempts to reconstruct its institutions and ideology, as indeed its history, are biased by the disjointed nature of our sources and the wholly random circumstances of their preservation and discovery. Often we are forced to base what synthesis is possible on data of only limited temporal and spatial relevance, yet not to attempt an overall view would be to reduce the history and archaeology of Mesopotamia to no more than dull catalogues. The picture we have sketched is based on evidence that might be differently interpreted. Any study of Babylonian civilization is and will remain an amalgam of near truths, misunderstandings, and ignorance. But this can be said of more periods of history than most historians would admit. In our case, the single stroke of an archaeologist's pick can revise whole chapters of ancient history.
Yeah.
So I think that is worth keeping in mind, right? That it would be easy to say, oh, we don't know.
Yes.
We just got some pottery and a stone head and a copper toilet or something. But we just don't know. But like they said, that would just be, we found it, but it would be without a narrative, and to your point as well, Nick, without a narrative, which we kind of seem to need for things to stick.
Yeah.
So a narrative is preferable to no narrative,
Yes.
as long as we keep in mind that the narrative might be totally or largely false. Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
and also that it is being revised constantly in the light of new information and new understandings. And it's interesting too. So near the end of this book, there's a section
that one,
that talks about the fact that there really was no differentiation in Babylon, as there really wasn't actually in ancient China and many other places, between magic, science, and religion.
Yes,
that they are one, right? And that we tend to divide them by our own modern ways of thinking. But back then, I mean, I was really fascinated by that last section about the idea that you had two kinds of doctors. You have the one that you go to because there's a demon living in my spleen and you need to help. And if that's not helping, maybe I'll see that guy who actually makes medicine.
Yeah.
I'll get a second opinion from the guy who practices some version of science.
Well, the other thing as well, the other thing that I think is even more problematic is when knowledge and religion were entirely intertwined, right? Because I think now in a largely secular world, it's tempting for people to want to totally write out.
To disentangle that.
Because it's so much basically superstition involved. But that's how, unfortunately, that or for whatever your take on it is, that is how we learnt through history. Was I mean, people may want to abolish the church or churches or your church or whatever now, but at a certain point in time, that would have been the seat of learning, right? That's how you would have learned everything else, which is real, because you had to go and pretend to have an imaginary friend called God as well, right? And you can't really disentangle. It's kind of a bit of a fool's errand. You just kind of have to accept that, right? And then move on.
I mean, you go back far enough. You go back to far pre-Christian, mythologies, and so many of them revolve around sun worship, which to me still is the one that makes the most sense. It's the one that I, on a cellular level, understand. In that my body needs vitamin D, or vitamin D, as we would have said in Ireland when I was a kid. And so, like right now, we're coming up to the solstice, and I crave sunlight. We had today, I felt like no hours because it rained all day, and it was like dark until 9 in the morning, and then it got dark again by 4, and I was like, holy shit, I understand why my forebears worshipped the sun.
I wonder if anyone ever made a study about longer survival rates of pagan religions in shitholes with bad weather.
It would make sense. It would make sense.
Survive
people along the equator didn't need to worship the sun so much. It was just an omnipresent feature of their lives. But I do feel, and so ancient Irish or ancient Celtic mythology, we have Lu, who is our sun god. But the sun, go back to the time of the saber-toothed tiger, and the sun offered safety, it offered warmth, it offered light. Night was a scary, scary time.
And again, to the point of, again, intertwined would have been all the nonsense about, these celestial beings being anthropomorphized as
that word,
as deities.
Yes.
But at the same time, that's when people started slowly picking up bits of real knowledge and learning,
paying attention to the movement of the stars and the planets. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. We should
jump. This is all very heady stuff, Clive.
There's dick jokes coming up. Don't worry.
Oh, good.
Okay, so let's randomly jump about like a couple of twats here.
Here,
some pulls from this book. That's not to say it's a nuke to this book, because it's the one I read first. So obviously, a lot of this stuff's going to appear in all of these books. But so things worth just jump in anytime you feel you want to add. and then see if you've got anything extra to add at the end as well. But so things that are worth thinking about. These are things that we might go in deeper on other, just kind of things that jump out at me. So clay doesn't decompose like wood and stuff, and that's why we know a lot of this stuff, right? Because it was baked into clay. And I like the idea as well that they, I don't know if they were unsanitary or didn't really have. So basically, when things fell to bits, they just kind of seem to have left things lying around, built on top of them, built on top of them, built on top of them. And that's where you get these mounds, right? Which are called hells, I believe. And this is basically the Mother Lode. This is how we know a lot of this stuff, is people burrow down into these tells, and I guess from the placement of them in the strata, they're able to tell how old things are. And that's one way that we can divine. So when you think about it in those terms, you realize quite how shaky the ground. It's kind of like, imagine, someone went to your local skip to figure out your life, not just your life, the life of your
civilization,
by looking through a pile of old discarded
trash.
Here's a apple core, old pram.
Here's a receipt for an issue of Swank magazine.
A page ripped from Jugs Monthly. An used condom. A banana skin. A dead baby. Whatever.
Yes, for sure. And I was also interested to see that apparently one of the greatest excitement kind of moments, I guess, for these people is if there was a house fire, because house fires baked those clay tablets so that they were much more impervious to weathering and so on. It might have been a tragedy for the family whose house burned down, but historians are excited.
Plus, as well, we're learning about this stuff for the crap they throw away, and you wonder, what about the stuff that they looked after, which is probably more important to them? Like, is there any record of that stuff? Like, is there,
but as we know from Gilgamesh, though, for example, some of the stuff that was crap was copies of stuff that was important, like the Epic of Gilgamesh itself, right, which was used as a scribal training thing. You copy out passages of this, and luckily there was lots of kids who were made to do it, and now we have a reasonable amount of the original.
I suppose a comparison would be if you only had like one or two original copies of like the Iliad written down, and someone used the reverse to put a shopping list or just calculations on, and then threw it away.
But I mean, that's interesting too. How much of the kind of the writing that survives from Mesopotamia is actually economic. It is shopping lists, it is invoices, it is lists of that stuff. I found that really interesting. It takes a while before story starts to appear. Writing seems to be originally for a mercantile,
right? And it's very interesting, and it's interesting to read about. But it strikes me as it must be very boring to actually research, though, right? Like,
I would think
you must, if you were an archaeologist and you were digging, you must be just, I fucking hope and pray I find a poem or a story.
A bit of a story, not another list of sheep trading.
4 baskets of cows came in today. So that brings us as well. I suppose we should talk about the cuneiform, right? And this is one way that's one way to look at, because that's the other difficult thing is, are we talking about Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylonia, Assyria? And one way of thinking of it is as the cuneiform lands, right? Which is one phrase that comes up in this book, which is, I suppose Mesopotamia, that's basically Iraq, with some of Syria. And lucky for us that both those places, really easy to go into and look
Oh,
around.
very stable.
How much conflict going on in this place. So that's another thing to contend with, right? Imagine if you went to your local library and inside there was like a firefight. Like
right,
every time you wanted
to take books out,
dodging bullets and grenades and things.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we can only say, like, thank goodness that those great folks at the British Museum, went around and stole all of that stuff and moved it to the safe environs of London.
Yeah, well, I mean, as reprehensible as some of that stuff is considered now, on the other hand, you are thinking like, well, you're not doing a good job of looking after it too. But then again, I suppose you could argue that those same people might also have redrawn certain maps that put people into conflict.
Yes, that created the issues.
Yeah, it's a hornet's nest, right?
Yes,
And but also there's like Anatolia, with Turkey, and then of course bleeds over into Elam, Persia, right? And that's the other thing as well is fascinating is later on where we'll get to in the second book is when, because the second book goes on from this period a little bit and talks about Mesopotamia as parts of other empires, which is fascinating as well.
Well, I was so excited when Xerxes shows up because I'm like, I know him from 300.
Right, and that's the other.
He has that great nose ring.
Is how is the overlap? Because we tend to think of at this point of places in their ascendancy, right? So you talk about the Mesopotamian and then the Greek and the Roman and the Achaemenid Empire and stuff like this, and Egypt. But then of course there were periods of time where something was
they were on the wane.
Yeah, but it was still there.
Yes, yeah.
It still had a history, but it was
Greece. Greece is still there, but you have to imagine people at the Parthenon being like,
right,
we used to be the center of human civilization.
Right, exactly.
What happened?
And so it's also fascinating to think when that overlap happened, that weird period where something is not exactly.
Sorry, I should apologize to any of our Greek listeners. I wasn't.
All our people on the Parthenon right now.
Yeah, we feel your pain.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, like, I think there's ebbs and flows, right? And
I hark back to that great Welsh empire that took over the world. It's about that no longer exists.
Yes. But I just actually I have a quote here from quite early on because I was always interested in funny enough the religious stuff. Because again, there's more of a narrative attached to that, I think, than to maybe some of the more mercantile stuff, or and so we'll get to Inanna, because it is interesting to me that she plays such a central role really as a goddess in ancient Babylonia, but this idea of sacrificing to the gods, like giving them food and drink, is something that also seems I mean, I don't know where this begins. I assume it probably begins before this, and this whole thing of spilling the entrails of animals and reading the future. Like, I've seen it in Roman. Yeah, I've seen it in Roman stuff and in Greek stuff. It exists in Celtic mythology. But like, who was the first person who had this notion that, like, yes, if I just spill the guts of this bovine, I'm going to be able to read the future? Like, I mean these are questions I have.
Some fucking chance at the end of on the business end of a sword about to be killed by someone demanding answers, and the only thing they have to hand is a goat, and they just fucking talk their way. King, no, great king, I will tell you whether you will win the battle of Magobagom. Let me just open up this poor goat. Can you see by the way that the
liver and spleen have fallen?
This says that you will have great victory, O great king, and you are fantastic. And then, great, we shall drink to battle. And then, meanwhile he's running out the back door. Phew! And he's accidentally invented a whole new
an entire thing that just that the travels from. I mean, as I said, this is the oldest place I've seen it. But then I know that it follows us through, as I said, various other civilizations for thousands of years after this still practice this art of divination through entrail spilling.
So that's the thing, isn't it? As we should keep.
How does it get to Ireland from?
We've gone back as far as we can because it's written down. But there's a whole period where people just went around doing stuff and whistling to themselves until someone said, "Huh? Should we write this down?" So it's already kind of maybe old hat, right? What we consider like, it's already
common practice. It's just I wonder where it comes from. But one way to keep the gods and goddesses happy was to provide them with regular meals. The 2 sheep listed in the economic document might have been for this purpose. Just like humans, the gods enjoyed feasting, so meat, beer, bread, vegetables, and fruits were laid out for them several times a day. And in fact, beer seems to have been an invention of the ancient Mesopotamians, which is, that's worth noting. Thanks.
Thank them for that. I mean, I don't know what, I'm guessing ancient Mesopotamian beer was somewhat different from
probably
the beer we think of nowadays.
Probably not ice cold in a frosty mug.
Wouldn't have thought so.
No.
Also, I have had jumping around, no desire in the past to watch any of the Scorpion King sequels, but apparently Sargon of Akkad is a character in Scorpion King Rise of a Warrior.
Okay.
So I'm now a little bit tempted to watch that. Yeah. So here we go. So like we said, there's a whole lot of pre-deluge stuff, right? But one could argue that the first big community or settlement anywhere in the world, about 3100 BC, is the city of Uruk.
Yes.
I think Gilgamesh was
either
from Uruk or became king of Uruk.
He was king of Uruk, for sure. And helped to rebuild the walls. The walls had already fallen down, so obviously by the time he took over, it was already an established city. But yes.
Right. This idea as well, speaking of who was the first, straight out the gate, the concept of having a walled city fascinates me as well, because you don't just put a wall around a city like for a laugh, right? There's a reason for it, and you have to wonder what is that? Why the wall? Because it's not as if there was even.
Oh, wasn't Humbaba was that giant guy who lived in the cedar forest who was fucking shit up. So maybe there were concerns about Humbaba.
But it's not as if they would have had, because at this point, obviously, I suppose they would have, but it wouldn't have been as if I wouldn't have thought there wouldn't have been much threat
warring city states or anything at this time. Yeah.
What? Who are the walls keeping out? Like, is it like that shitty Great Wall film with Matt Damon? Was it like Monsters or like Attack on Titan? Right? It was.
Yes. They needed to keep the Titans out for sure.
But it is fascinating. It does make you wonder why, or was it a superstition, or was it symbolic in some way? Like we want to
show strength for sure.
Where the city begins.
Yeah. Another thing that I really like, which comes up in this and in the other history book, is this idea of the cylinder seal, right? Which is this like tubular thing with a relief carving on it that you roll along to create this kind of seamless image. And what it reminds me of is in 1960s cartoons where they would like run the same background over and over behind like on a characters,
spool.
Yeah. And it seems like the ancient Mesopotamian version of the background of a Flintstones cartoon where they've only got 2 trees and a thing.
Right. Or they're running like for like a minute past the same window.
Yes,
Exterior shot of like the house is that small.
Yes, but it is also kind of genius. I never thought, but it makes perfect sense to create this thing
Yeah.
that when you roll it, it creates a seamless, endless, image. It's cool.
And of course, the goddess Inanna was the queen of the city of Uruk, right? She was the main deity that they adopted. And again, so this is something I didn't even take, because when we get to the Inanna book, we'll talk about this a little bit more as well. But I have no concept really, because you know Gilgamesh, and Inanna turns up in the Gilgamesh stories.
Yes, and not the most sympathetic.
No, she's the one who releases the Bull of Heaven, right? Which we talked about that.
Because she gets slut shamed. She gets slut shamed by Gilgamesh, and then gets really mad and goes to her dad.
Yeah. So, but that's the interesting thing as well, is we think of almost singularly, we think of like Inanna, but then of course, if you look at the gods, family tree, she's nowhere near the top.
No.
So that's the other thing as well. I don't really have the capacity at this point. I'm going to have to go over it over again. Like even the whole Mount Olympus kind of family tree is not in. I don't have entire clarity of it in my mind, like all the branches, but I have a kind of idea.
Right.
Zeus at the top and all that, and their older gods.
But even he is the son of one of the Titans, right?
Yes,
Saturn devouring his sons or whatever, right? So.
But I have a kind of vague idea.
Yes,
but when it comes to this,
it's mysterious for sure. But I love that stuff. I love, you know me and my appreciation for fantasy shit that you don't have. I'm always excited when a book at the back has some horrible family tree,
right?
Of like,
oh no, I mean, I'm interested if it's connected to not reality, but something that at a certain time was important enough
that a fat man with a beard, you're saying, didn't write down fairly recently.
As long as it's far back enough in history that you can argue that a belief in it actually changed the tides of time and history.
Sure. Okay.
That's worth knowing about.
600 years from now, we may be there with Lord of the Rings and fucking what's his face, George R. R. Martin, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. There's too much other stuff to be getting on with for me to even entertain. Anyway.
So can we get back to cuneiform for a second? Because I'm also fascinated by this movement.
You mentioned the cylinder seal as well, and that was kind of a proto-cuneiform as well.
Yes,
yeah.
And this idea that it moves from something that is basically more hieroglyphic in nature, right? Where images standing for whole words. And at some point over that, thousands of years, it becomes an actually like a syllabaric. I don't know how the hell what that word is anyway.
Right.
But it becomes a sound alphabet, right?
And when it does, it seems to be Sumerian,
right?
Whoever the fuck they were, it's Sumerian, and then it would have been adopted. There would have been different pronunciations in Akkadian and different language,
right?
So to a certain extent, they would have. This is the other thing that fascinates me as well, is to what extent, like in, for instance, later on when Aramaic took over, how much did people speak in Aramaic or actually speak in their own language, and then also share? There's like Greek would have been the lingua franca of but you had people speaking their own. Oh, actually, even within the Greek city-states, they would have had their own localized version of Greek, and then they would have spoken. They would have spoken Pan-Greek or whatever, right? So, and plus as well, even nowadays, it's fascinating that theoretically, if someone was well educated enough, a Korean, a Chinaman, and a Japanese man. There's a hilarious joke coming up here.
I was going to say, can you say Chinaman anymore?
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, sure, okay, all right.
Could all speak. All right, China woman could all read the
yes,
same
so
note.
I mean, what in Japan
but they couldn't discuss it. Right?
What we all call kanji, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Is obviously the Chinese characters that
simplified usually, but
yes.
but still you can but potentially if you used
I had
a
perfect
character.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Here's your Chinese Japanese joke. I had a student in Japan who told me that he lived in New York for a while, and as he was in his 20s, and he was down to his last like couple of dollars, and he goes to a Chinese restaurant because at this point in the kind of late 70s, there's not much in the way of Japanese food in New York. That boom hasn't really happened yet. And so he said, well, at least I can get some rice or something at a Chinese place, you know. So he goes to this Chinese restaurant, gets the menu, and he's like puzzling over the various Chinese characters. He's like, well, that one's chicken, so I'm guessing this is some sort of yakitori, like chicken on a stick. And he can't read the second symbol, and he gets served a bowl of chicken's feet.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, ah, shit. But there you go. Obviously, he could recognize some of that.
Was that a joke?
No, it wasn't a joke. That's a true story.
All right. No, sorry.
That really happened.
Oh, okay. All right. That's a terribly constructed joke, I thought.
Yes.
I've actually got one. Here we go.
Dane Cook did that on one of his.
I've actually got one here. So a North Korean and a South Korean.
Oh, wait, so are we honestly taking a stop now to tell racist jokes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go into a yakiniku barbecue meat restaurant. Late at night, and then the chef runs out and he goes, sorry, no, there's no more meat. Sorry, there's no more meat. And apparently, so the puzzle is out, and the Japanese man goes, what do you mean no more? There's no more. And then the North Korean says, what's meat? And the South Korean says, what's sorry? There we go.
Wow.
Make of that as you will. But when I've told that joke, people who know about these things, it usually gets a pretty good knowing laugh. So that's we just totally got rid of all our South Korean listeners there as well.
We've insulted the Greeks so far, and anyone with any kind of basic knowledge of history obviously has left by now.
Oh, they fucked off in the first minute. They just took a look at us, and
I'm not learning anything here.
No. Yes, Samuel Noah Kramer is spinning in his grave at high velocity. He's drilling through the earth and going into other coffins and going around the graveyard.
Maybe he's making new discoveries. Maybe he's finding more cuneiform down there.
He'll thank us in the end. So we move apparently the next kind of epoch here in 2900 BC is called the early dynastic period. Dynastic, even if my mouth were. And this is when the Sumerian king list is recompiled, right? Which is again,
they love making lists. These people, they liked a good list.
They did.
You might be Mesopotamian, actually, Clive. I wonder, maybe.
I'm not a big list guy.
Yeah, well, I feel like you're attempting to make a list of the entire workings of human civilization.
Right. Yeah, we're both doing that, Nick. You forgot we were up to here. So and also we should mention we were talking about the god again. Sorry, jumping around like a motherfucker, but this is what's tell you what, skip this episode and go on to later ones because we might come back to some of this with a bit more clarity. But anyway, so we should also mention, so we were talking about the gods thing. So Enlil, I think he seems to be the big daddy at the top, right?
Yes.
And then I guess the story goes that there were lesser gods, and then they got tired of working and created humans to do work for them. Is that kind of their genesis?
That seems to be what it is. Yeah.
Right. What else have I written down here? Oh, Sir Leonard Woolley. Right. we'll get to him.
Okay.
He was someone who excavated the royal tombs of Ur, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, moving forward, we got 2334 BC, the Akkadian Empire. And this is Sargon of Akkad, of Scorpion King, Rise of a Warrior fame. This is where he comes in. And his daughter, Enheduanna, becomes the high priestess of the moon god Nana, aka Ashim Baba.
Mm-hmm.
And what else we got? Apparently, the city-states of Elba and Mari. So I guess on the outskirts of. So this is the tricky thing as well, is you kind of understand. Okay, southern part of Iraq between Tigris and Euphrates. That's what we're talking about, basically. To begin with, that's kind of where Uruk is situated, right? But then what happens is, as we'll get, is other people come in and from the nearby Zarog Mountains, whatever the fuck those mountains are called, and other regions, and then they kind of invade or take over, and it expands, and then so then the place is the same, but it takes the name of the ethnic group who are now in charge, but then that expands, and then that shrinks again, and that becomes its own. So the place is expanding, shrinking, moving, nearby places, and different ethnic groups. So you don't know who the fuck you're talking about, really. And even though it's a small part of the world, again, we're thinking of it in terms of modern day Iraq, but in those days, it would have been huge, right? So I'm wondering if the comparison is, imagine the European mainland. And there's French, German, Italians, with their own very distinct cultures. We're all lumping them together as the same group of people. Is what it's like in a way. So that's what I mean. On the one hand, you're trying to get a handle on these people, and there's not much. So you just. But then obviously, if that information was extant, then these books, as important as they are now and the best that they've got, they would go right out the window, right? It would be kind of like someone writing a book about all the French, Germans, Italians, Spanish, they're all the same group of
Europeans.
People. They're all the Ungongs or something like that, or you know. So that's the thing, is you want to know, but it's so tempting to, because you're like, I'm going to do all this work, and basically what I'm going to learn is lies. So why do I even bother?
Nice.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. But I mean, what else? We don't have anything else at the moment, right? And that's the nature of studying history. That's the nature of studying the history of last week, is a series of competing narratives and alternative facts.
At least you have a fair crack at that, right? Because
some context. Yes. I mean, we have even less for sure.
Nick, right now we could just be watching all episodes of It Ain't Half Hot, Mum, and getting drunk. But enjoying ourselves.
We've chosen instead to wrestle with ancient Mesopotamia. So divine right by or divine right of kings. And I don't know if it predates this, but certainly it comes up here. Actually, in this section we're talking about right now, it's the first place it shows up seems to be the early dynastic period, is when the first king says, "Oh yeah, the gods have chosen me to be king, so bear that in mind." And that's always been fascinating, because that continues to some degree till now, right? I mean, does Charles claim divine right? It seems like on some level it's implicit.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes. I mean, otherwise, what the fuck are you doing? Owning all these lands and castles. Yeah. I mean, yet to have our proper revolution, you could argue, right? The Tsarists are still here. to a certain extent. So 2193, third dynasty of Ur, and apparently this is where the Akkadian Empire collapses during the fourth successor to Sargon's reign, due to internal rebellion and invasion of the highland people from the Zagros Mountains. Then the territory, whatever that territory was, split into two. And the biggest one is Ur, with the king Ur-Nama. And yeah, so he's the first, he's like the pre-Hammurabi guy to have things written down, right?
Yeah.
And I think to your point, he might be the fella who said that he was ordained by God. And he's also, he starts building ziggurats.
Yes, I do like these ziggurats.
Nick, I love a good ziggurat. I mean,
they are, yeah. And that's one of the nice things, actually. You know, when we were reading Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the things I did was I bought that graphic novel. I bought the ziggurat.
That would be cool. And, I want to come visit your ziggurat.
Yeah, I live in it on the weekends.
And ziggurat.
Make my libations to Inanna, and it's all good times. I also love the fact that at this time it was safer to drink beer than water. That was something that comes up in that section of the book. That, like, because it was fermented and stuff, there was a biological process going on that sort of made it cleaner than the actual most of the water in Mesopotamia. So
I should clarify with the viewers as well that when Nick says making his libations to Inanna, what he means is wanking over a picture of Red Sonja.
Yes. I assumed that was implicit. But, you know, obviously a drawing by John Byrne, not, Bridget Nielsen.
We've lost all the Bridget Nielsen fans now. And
our audience is dwindling by the second.
If you're in that rare space of being a Bridget Nielsen fan in South Korea, who's also a historian, I mean, you're furious. Yeah, you're a reader of Rage magazine. Also, taxation apparently comes in at this point.
Yes,
always a fascinating topic, and so apparently death penalties as well were part of this fella Ur-Nama's pre-Hammurabi code, right? And then also, so apparently you have colonies as well, right? So that it's not necessarily part of, I suppose, like an empire, right? So rather than as far away as Turkey, Afghanistan, Bahrain, and apparently even the Indus Valley civilization have these kind of little colonies of whatever the fuck we're calling Babylon at this
point.
Whatever. Right. 2004 to 1595. Apparently this is referred to as the Old Babylonian period. So I mean, it's all old to us, right?
Yes.
But, and so this would have been. This seems as if there was more collection of large city-states rather than just one big urban center at this point, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them would have been, and here we go again, Amorite dynasties. So, who the fuck are the Amorites? How do they differ from the Akkadians, the Sumerians? You know.
Yep.
And
you were asking the wrong man, Clive.
Also enter Hammurabi of Babylon, who was a pretty big deal, pretty big king, conquered a whole lot of land, and famously, the Code of Hammurabi, right, which is
which I did notice was very fair, because adultery was defined differently for men and women. A woman committed adultery if she had sexual relations with anyone other than her husband, whereas a married man was free to consort with concubines and prostitutes. He was only required to stay away from respectable women. A man could readily divorce his wife, though he did owe her alimony, but according to the laws, a woman could divorce her husband only if she could prove to the city council that he'd been maligning her undeservedly.
There we go. In certain parts of the world, not much has changed. And
Nope.
in most of the world, the double standard still applies.
Yes.
Thank God we're on the right side of that line, Nick.
Oh yes.
I mean,
yes.
I'm all for, the equality, but while the inequality exists, I'm glad I'm on this side.
It is better to have been born with the equipment that we were born with, for sure.
Yes. And then
we're cracking on. We're cracking on to the late Bronze Age, are we?
Well, the fucking Hittites.
Yes.
From Anatolia, I guess, under King Mursli I, the inventor of muesli. Apparently, he sacks the city of Babylon in 1595, and then just fucks off home. So apparently, there's just a vacuum left there, right?
Okay.
Filled by the king of the Kassites now, whoever the fuck they are, they're in town. So the Kassite dynasty, and yes, we enter the late Bronze Age, 1595 to 1155. Again, just that in itself, it's a huge period of time. Like, what the fuck are we even doing here, Nick? So, and then this is the time of another name to remember, the Mitanni. So this is apparently a kingdom that expanded out through Syria, northern Mesopotamia. Now this fascinated me. Apparently, this place was attacked by the armies of the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III. So,
I mean, we haven't really mentioned this, but there is obviously increasing back and forth between Egypt and I guess what we're calling Babylonia at this point. And there seem to be treaties, and there's been periods of mutual respect, and then periods of
Well, this fascinates me is because we're doing it thematically, like we said, we're doing Babylon, we'll do Egypt. But at a certain point, what's going to be interesting is when we know enough, which will be in a few lifetimes. Our great grandchildren might get to this. When we know enough about, we can talk about the coexistence, right? And because as well, there are alliances being formed as well, and marriages, daughters being sent to this empire, that empire, gold and silver being traded, not just within the city-states within this area, but yes, obviously further afield, places like maybe even the Indus Valley and what would become the Achaemenid Empire in Persia and stuff like that. So we're looking fairly micro, but there is this larger macro kind of thing, right? Again, it's kind of like now if you were writing the history of Canada as if the rest of the world didn't exist. Right. We're not going to talk a lot about Hammurabi just because that's definitely going to be, we're definitely reading at least one book about Hammurabi.
Yes.
So we'll get to Hammurabi in more detail. Likewise, I think we'll probably have to read about, because this fascinated me as well, because this is where we know, and it's actually accidentally good timing here. We were talking about the alliances and trade and how it is. The Amana letters. The Amana letters give the name given to apparently this motherload of clay tablets that they found at a certain point, which we get a lot of this information from, which were basically detailing kind of gossip, I suppose.
Yes.
Court gossip of the time. And then here's another one that jumped out at me, but I couldn't really find much about. So there's a plague at some point as well.
Yes. Yeah, that was interesting to me too.
Under Muesli II, right?
Yes. Yes, there's a great part where he tries to, where Muesli tries to reason with the gods. If you, the gods, my lords, do not send the plague away from Hatti, the bakers of offering bread and the libation bearers will die. And if they die off, the offering bread and the libation will be cut off from the gods, my lords. So keep killing us and we're not feeding you, fucks. Right. Seems to be the message there. And then
fighting back.
Sorry?
He's fighting back.
Yes, yeah. And then there's also this part where there's this like back and forth between the Hittite and Assyrian king, where the Assyrian king is writing, saying that like he's calling the Hittite king a brother, and the Hittite king writes his letter back. So you've become a great king, have you? But why do you continue to speak about brotherhood? For what reason should I call you my brother? Were you and I born of the same mother? As my grandfather and father did not call the king of Assyria brother, you should not keep writing to me about great kingship. It displeases me.
Yeah, it's a shame we're missing the little cuneiform clay tablet like notes people made to themselves. Apparently, when you receive it, there's one they might find one time, and in a tell as just twat.
Yes, yeah, it's a cuneiform.
Yeah. Or one of those pictures you used to draw in school of someone with a dick on their head.
Yes,
yeah.
And the sea peoples show up around this time too. Not long after the plague.
The fucking sea people. This is something that fascinates me, and there's a book actually. There's a book which is quite good. The year the world collapsed or something, which I put.
Whenever even I see the name, whenever I read about the sea peoples, immediately I'm like,
it's the sea devils.
Yeah, I'm seeing the followers of Dagon. It's full on ins.
I'm seeing John Pertwee and the Sea Devils.
Right, yeah, which is very much inspired, I think, by the same.
I'm guessing.
Yeah,
but no, it is fascinating, and as far as I know, again, it's something I've always been. But I've deliberately put off because I thought we'd get to that book. We will get to it in this project. So, but it is something I've a little bit read about here and there, just because it's irresistible, really, when you hear it.
All around the Mediterranean, basically, right? All these
civilizations
are sacked and things fall from this mysterious race of pirates that nobody quite knows who they were.
The only clue was a mysteriously materializing London police box was.
All right. Okay. There could be a hint.
Yes, also Muesli II as well, inspired by his father, invented Cocoa Pops. Little known fact.
Slightly less nutritious.
There have been a few lies in this podcast. See if you can spot them. So we got and then apparently, and there's a gap here. Apparently, there's a Hattusa Empire, which I don't remember really, but there was one, and then it collapses, as does the Hittite Empire, as part of this, the Sea Devils turning up. Which we shall return to that in a future episode. We're not going to go anywhere near that, because that sounds fascinating to me. And as far as I know, there still isn't really a solid explanation that everyone can agree on.
Yeah.
Right. 972 to 612, the Neo-Assyrian Empire, King Asranasrapal II builds a new capital city called Talhu, complete with a really dope palace, apparently.
Yep.
But we know about that.
And this is a big empire, right? Apparently this was 4 times larger than any empire before. And they did a lot of kicking the shit out of people. These guys were
the
unprecedented brutality was their approach, apparently.
This was like the this seems like he was the Genghis Khan of this. So we got like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, most of Egypt, apparently.
Yeah.
Parts of Iran, Jordan, Israel Palestine,
and into Turkey.
Well, the Palestine bit is interesting as well, because apparently that would have included somewhere called Bit Omri, which is apparently what they referred to as Israel in the Bible.
Okay.
Another note, Austin Henry Lee. This is when we get to our archaeology episode. So apparently this is the guy who discovered the library at Nineveh. And again, library at Nineveh, I think this is another episode into itself, right? Where the Epic of Gilgamesh was first discovered. When it was uncovered.
And where that guy stripped off naked, what he was so excited about.
Well, I don't know if he did it in the ruins. I think he took it home to his study.
Yeah, he did. Translated it.
Yeah,
And
then,
while
yeah,
that
he was
process,
also jacking off to a drawing of Red Sonja.
I believe so.
Yeah, what was his name? They're a Sheehan or something.
Oh yes,
Relation of yours.
I think it was. Yes, he was a relative. Yeah. Anyway, these guys they made no attempt to be liked at all. They were very much ruled by the stick. No carrot, all stick was their approach.
Right. But apparently, this was undone by civil wars, or a series of civil wars. And again, I'm assuming this is another. I mean, to me that sounds like an entire, at least one episode on its right. A huge empire undone by civil wars. I mean,
yes, yeah.
That's
it also seems a bit like the Romans as well, like that the conquest or that obsession with furthering your borders to the point where it's just unsustainable.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You're so far out from your center of your civilization that you're just
you don't have the supply lines, I suppose, in war terms. Yeah. So then apparently that land was split between again, Babylonians, whoever exactly they are at the moment, and the Medes. Don't know. 612 to 539, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, when the first discos were built.
Yes. Yeah. This was the new wave of Babylonia. Everyone got spiky haircuts.
Yeah, and they switched from 7-inch to 12-inch extended remixes of the bangers of the day.
Yes. It's hard to get the cuneiform into the grooves,
right? But those Babylon beats, they were,
Oh yeah. Rastatastic, I think.
Did you just say rastatastic?
I did, yeah. Okay. I believe that they're always banging on about Babylon, aren't they? Those Rastas.
That's true. So here we go. We're getting a bit nearer something, I suppose, nearing kind of infamy in the Western-centric canon in the form of King Nebuchadnezzar II.
Yes.
Who is a big name in the Bible, because he was the guy who took all those Jews to Babylon, right?
Yes.
To build his extension on his house or whatever.
Yeah.
But apparently he was responsible. This is when Babylon became the Babylon of wonder, right? This was the one that apparently Herodotus, who never went there but heard about it from other people, wrote about. This is the His histories are awesome for that. I've heard tell of a race of monkey men who lived beyond those mountains. There were legends of a curly-haired man called the Doctor. Also, another thing we should mention before we head into Babylon by Joe, we're running out of time as well, but
we're not. We maybe want to give that a gloss, because I do want to get to Inanna.
We haven't even mentioned one thing which really jumped out, especially from the second book. That's Babylon, Joan Oates, the revised edition. Is I fucking love the art, the little carved stone heads and bronzes, and
agreed.
I love these things. I don't know. There's something. There's a I know we're talking about a span of, a millennia or whatever, but there's a definite aesthetic kind of. There's some kind amazing of aesthetic link between all these things, isn't there?
Oh yeah,
of making things squat and And I love
something like comic book about it that's really satisfying.
If I was
Mad Magazine as carved into.
If I was wealthy, properly fucking playboy wealthy, I think I would probably collect Mesopotamian art and figurines and stuff. Of course they should probably be in a museum, but I would like to hoard a few for myself in my little ziggurat that I would build.
Yes, where you would offer libations to whomever.
Yeah. Right. So Babylon. So yeah, book review time. So this is the logical next stop. As I know, it's still the best. If this is your starting point, and you want bullet point, more than that, to be fair, and like you said, to your point, it's very readable.
Yes.
This is less readable.
This is what is assigned to you by the professor of the course in Mesopotamian history that you have taken, and that the professor tells you, oh, you know, this is in itself is you know, an absolute gloss. This is barely touching the depth of the subject, but this is the best we can do in the time we have. But it's very much a textbook.
Yes, it is. However, if you can, and I think it is a matter of maybe slightly us being, because I don't think it's supposed to be, it is exactly what it's supposed to be, right?
Yes,
and you can train your, like, the first half of this book, a lot of it just, I zoned out and glassy-eyed in the bath, and just it didn't go in. But I found, as I got slightly more used to it and was aware that I had to apply myself more to it, and maybe not drink beer while reading it as well. I found that actually this expands a lot on the other earlier books that we read, and this is the logical next step. There's a shitload of info in this, and also that thing I quoted. Obviously, Joe Notes is very, very, very conscious of how, you know, potentially just built on sand all of this is as well, right?
Yes. I quite like this. This is quite early in the book. The prime precept of Western consciousness, know thyself, would have been incomprehensible to the Mesopotamian, and its corollary injunction that the proper study of mankind is man would have struck him as frivolous and even dangerous nonsense. To the Mesopotamian, the crucial and urgent study was the entire objective universe, without any interposition of the self between the observer and the observed. So they were really not into that idea of things being what is that word I'm looking for? The opposite, subjective, right? That this idea of personal subjectivity would have been, you know, ridiculous. There probably has never been another civilization so single-mindedly bent on the accumulation of information and on eschewing any generalization or enunciation of principles. So they truly were just all about listing stuff and trying to understand the nuts and bolts and facts of...
They'd love this podcast.
They would, yes.
No context necessary. Well, also from the John, this one I think is a fascinating quote. One of the world's most distinguished Assyriologists once wrote that a systematic presentation of Mesopotamian religion cannot and should not be written. Boom. Just cut that out. Like, you just can't relate to it.
You're going to open a portal to hell if you try.
A little bit of knowledge goes along, is a dangerous thing, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I chose the wrong thing.
Yeah, you mixed a few metaphors there, but that's all right.
But that's fascinating, isn't it? That even like like someone whose job is to shine a light on the ancient world said, no, but that back
try
in that hole, cover it up with sand. We won't be having any of that
Necronomicon nonsense here.
Right. But that is fascinating that they like deliberately cannot and should not, like, even if you could, don't.
I also like this. In theory, the Sumerian city was the actual property of its main deity, to whom it was assigned on the day of its creation. The total identification of a god with city was an underlying tenet of the Sumerian society. That's something I don't know that we have in any kind of modern context that I can think of. That there's like most of our religions now have this they're kind of more pan. They're not so geographically based.
Right. So some other bits and pieces, just like, so all that stuff we said before, obviously that's in here as well. But here's some extra stuff that jumped out that maybe to be fair, might have been in the very short introduction, but for some reason didn't jump out at me so much. But so as if this wasn't enough to deal with, in the introduction they go, yeah, but actually Nineveh, Eridu are much older and richer in heritage than Babylon. So you know, even all this, that's that's kid stuff. If you want the real good stuff, so that's exasperating. This also, this is where it makes a big deal about who the fuck exactly were the Sumerians. The other book just kind of doesn't get in because they've only got a limited amount of time. They just kind of get on with this. But this has a bit more room for like thinking about these things. And yes, who were the Sumerians does seem to be something like a pretty major conversation raging in historical circles, right? Like, even if there was someone called Sumerians. They weren't the Sea Devils, but like, who the fuck were the Sumerians? Who are we referring to when we were? And also the language as well seems to confuse some people, right? Like the language seems to be almost from nowhere. Like it doesn't seem to have any connection to any other tree of language that we're aware of.
Aliens?
Well, that's where some people go, right? When anything's a bit too confusing.
Yeah. By the way, this is beautiful.
Oh man, that's just one count. There's great illustrations in this book. We should mention it works and I'm wondering another thing we might do maybe one small episode about, if there is such a thing. I'm wondering if, and it's affordable, is if there's a nice coffee table book which is just
and
the
art and architecture.
I think that would be worth poring over, right? And also the other one I was thinking, again, a tangential, but because what I really like here in the opening is not of the period, obviously, but the Tower of Babylon by Bruegel.
Yeah, that's an awesome.
It would be fascinating. Awesome, I don't know if anyone's ever collected like portraits from the masters in general, related to Babylon.
Yeah.
That would be something I would pick up and gaze at. But anyway,
I noticed in the section on Sargon, who I swear that sounds like the name of a character that like John Philip Law might have played in Space Mutiny. But in any case,
hula hoop dance.
Yes, Sargon. Later legend attributes to him the first of the classic stories of a baby laid in a basket and abandoned in a river.
Right.
So pre-biblical,
But yeah, well, we were talking as well about Gilgamesh, obviously, and the Noah story, and then of course the whole. We were talking about the walled cities, and we were talking the walls of Jericho, and obviously walled cities were a thing, but and of course the big one, which we haven't come across, but the big one, of course, is just Babylon as a biblical concept, as like, and like you said, those Rastas, as like a Sodom and Gomorrah kind of place.
Yes.
Right? The whole Babylon, as you mentioned, and all of that. So that's a kind of fascinating thing as well, because even though again, you take it with a pinch of salt, but at the same time, you have to wonder what the truth element of it was. Like, is that because at a certain point maybe there was a thriving like red light district in Babylon at a certain point, or some racy cuneiform writing came out of there.
Right. Those hanging gardens were,
which apparently were actually probably in Nineveh as well.
Yes.
Babylon. But again, you don't know, that could stem back to like some extremely local kind of Nineveh council trying to get more money coming to them.
Yes.
And they weight are hanging, and they quickly put up some baskets. But I'm only semi joking, right? Because that's the thing. When nothing, hardly anything exists. When you find because now we have like you said, we can argue endlessly over one small thing because we have a variety of newspapers and sources online, and so imagine if the only bits of cuneiform left were like the Breitbart version of Mesopotamian history, right? You'd have a very skewed version, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is so there's another person who shows up here, and actually there was an article about this woman on BBC quite recently. But it's the as well as being the first, Enheduanna was the most distinguished in this long line of priestesses. There survive a number of hymns that she herself is said to have composed in excellent Sumerian, revealing her as history's first known literary figure.
Right, we mentioned her earlier, right? She's the one who became the moon goddess.
Yes. So she and there was a recently on the BBC website there was a lengthy article about about the fact that this woman is considered to be the first author.
Yeah, look it up yourselves. I'm not putting a link in there because by the time we're finished here, I'm just falling on the floor and bawling my eyes out because I'm so confused. Yes, also worth mentioning mathematics. Apparently some mathematics that predate Pythagoras by over 1,000 years.
Oh, yes. And actually another thing that just showed up that Jen sent me, my wife sent me a link to, was a beautiful star map carved into a circle of clay that comes from with like trajectories and stuff and like estimated orbits on it. And I was like,
they did have apparently these celestial observation points and schools, right? Which apparently even the Greeks knew about.
These people are, as I said, like that's what's so shocking to me that my education never touched on them that I'm aware of. But I tend to just note things that I think are funny or strange. Here's a section: with famine and desolation rampant. This is in the fall of Agade or Agad. The story continues. 8 of the major deities decide that for the good of mankind, Enlil's rage must be assuaged. They vow to him the total destruction of Agade and pronounce upon that city a lengthy curse. May your groves be heaped up like dust. May your clay bricks return to the depths of the earth. May your palace built with joyful heart be turned into a depressing ruin. Over the place where your rites and rituals were conducted, may the fox who haunts the ruined mounds glide his tail. May no human being walk because of snakes, vermin, and scorpions. There was a lot of that good stuff in a lot of like threats, a lot of good like solid like vows of vengeance in Gilgamesh as well. Like may your cock fall off and dust clog your asshole. Just like incredible insults.
I think that's ad verbatim. I think.
The early diss rap. The early it's good stuff.
Yeah. You would have liked to have seen them go up against the Cool Crush crew or something.
Yes.
In 81,
there was one that is literally like, may your dick be a worm-ridden plank or something like that. Just like, oh God. Youch.
Word. So then again, sorry, out of context, I didn't put a year for this, and I did. Cambyses II added Egypt to the Persian Empire, and then after some attempted coups, Darius imposed laws, roads, buildings, including a new capital at Persepolis. So I think this must be during a period where the Persians took over and built a canal from the Nile to the Red Sea. The end of his reign was the outbreak of the Greco-Persian. So there we go. So this was, so we're going into slightly outside what we consider,
Yes.
But it's worth mentioning, I think, that like we see these things bleed into each other, right? So yes, and then the Persians are defeated at Marathon in 490, and then you mentioned Xerxes as well,
yes,
right? So that's when it's interesting. It's kind of like, I suppose an equivalent would be like I suppose when Rome moved east, and it's still Rome, but it's now Byzantium.
Yes,
right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and then ultimately the the Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church becomes quite different from the Roman-based Catholic Church, right?
Same thing, but funnier hats.
Yes, yeah.
So, and also later on again, is just worth mentioning, and again, we'll get to this. It's interesting to consider, because I'd never really considered this before, but yeah, at a certain point, Babylon did, for a very short period of time, become part of the Macedonian Empire underneath Alexander the Great, right?
Right, yes.
So that's kind of interesting to consider as well.
Here's another quote.
They knew a little bit about medicine, and again, apparently we think they didn't because of Herodotus, again, the liar, who said something along the lines of, "Oh, those Mesopotamians, they're all ill. They don't have medicine." But apparently they did, and also this fascinated me. Apparently, they found trepanated skulls going back to like.
I'm always.
As
somebody, I know you don't believe in headaches, Clive.
No, I had a fucking headache last night.
Oh,
when I finally gave up on trying to make sense of all this. I literally had a headache.
So so yes, there have been moments in my life where I seriously.
So now I believe in them because I've had one.
There you go. Perfect. So yeah, I have often thought about the possibility of just taking a hand. I wouldn't even want an electric, like just a proper hand, old-fashioned drill. But one of my favorite parts of this is a beautiful quote from. So this is around the fall of Ur. So Ur-Nammu is killed in battle.
That is one of those. That is one of those names that you do wonder, like if someone asks someone, "What's your city called?" and they just stopped and thought, and then was like, "Yep, okay, wrote it down."
Well, I think we talk about this, but that is somewhat where the name of Canada comes from, right? In that Canada means village, and it was a misunderstanding between Samuel Champlain, I think, one of those Frenchies who came over here and started staking claims and putting crosses in the ground, and asked somebody where is this, and they were like, well, the village is over there, and they were like, oh.
Is that true though? Is that one of the thing? Is that like one of those like where the name kangaroo comes from? Apparently, is something along the lines of what's that over there, and as kangaroo, but kangaroo just meant animal, but apparently it's not true. Is it one of those?
I don't know. I mean, it's widely believed to be. It's written in textbooks here, so I don't know.
Oh, it must be true then.
But so it has to be. But in any case, so this is around 2028 to 2004, obviously BC. So there's this horrible, massive war, and Ur is ravaged, and one of the most moving of Sumerian poems records the catastrophe. Dead men, not potsherds, covered the approaches. The walls were gaping, the high gates, the roads were piled with dead. In the side streets where fasting crowds could gather, scattered they lay. In all the streets and roadways, bodies lay. In open fields that used to fill with dancers, they lay in heaps. The country's blood now filled its holes like metal in a mold. Bodies dissolved like fat left in the sun.
A necropolis.
Yeah, it's powerful writing. And again, these are the kind of things I have to say. These are it tends to be story and poetry that jumps off the page to me and makes me go, yeah, I want more of this.
Right.
But I do like a good floor plan. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and a pot. There's a pot there. And I was poring over the pictures and illustrations, even without context. I just like looking at it. Yeah,
it's amazingly sculpted.
Half dog, half toilet.
Yep.
So he could, after shitting, he could run away and as far as possible, so it didn't stink up your cigarette.
This was fascinating too. The widespread trading connections of old Babylonian Mesopotamia could be seen in the presence of such exotic objects as monkeys, presumably imported from Africa or India. Sculptures of friggin' monkeys.
Yeah.
Down there
and up there on the other page, that's one of my favorites on the opposite side. That
this terrifying that thing. What the hell's that? The Hellraiser?
That's Hughes's burn in Mad Max Fury Road.
I think it is. I think that's a Morton Joe.
Bane or something. Right. Let's see. Here's a challenge for you, Nick.
Okay.
Can we do Inanna in 6 minutes?
No.
Okay,
we can't.
Right.
Because this was my favorite of all three, but I'll try not to be any more loquacious than we've already been. But this was definitely the thing I enjoyed reading the most, because it's pure poetry, it's pure story. And,
also,
it's sexy as fuck.
Where you should brace, because this is where me and Nick are coming to plow your vulvas.
Yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Wow, is this thing filthy? That was really surprised.
It got a few libations out of me.
Funny that Gilgamesh shows up in here, but it's very much not the Gilgamesh. It's Gilgamesh, more of a brother to her than Gilgamesh the hero. So that the relations of the gods, and that all got a bit confusing, just because it's not really the Gilgamesh from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
No. So we should mention as well that Inanna, who's Cliff Notes version, goddess of love, war, and fertility, right? Married to Dumuzid, and also a kind of stand-in for the planet Venus.
Yeah.
And in one of the many stories or the poems, descends into the underworld and fights with her sister. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
They decide to split the world between them, and therefore that's how we get the cycle of seasons. One is sister time, one is Inanna time. And she's also, you may know her under the name of Ishtar.
Yes.
Who, of course, was worshipped by Fuad Ramses III in Blood Feast.
Yes.
And the feast of Ishtar he's preparing. I think Hishogonu has got his Egyptian and Babylonian mythology a bit mixed up,
right?
Didn't he?
And
just fair play, because it's a gore film, but
yes, yeah. But So she's awesome. She rejoices in her vulva quite a bit. This young goddess.
It's all about the vulva.
Yeah. Rejoicing at her wondrous vulva, the young woman Inanna applauded herself. So I quite like, there's an early story where she goes to her dad, and her dad gets hammered. He gets drunk, and he promises her like all of these gifts. And then she takes them, and then he sobers up, and he's like, oh shit, I gave my daughter all that stuff. What? And then he sends somebody out to try to get it all back. And it's a really enjoyably human kind of
right. I gave her my original pressing of The Fall in the whole live LP 10-inch.
Exactly.
That's incredibly rare, and only Stuart Lee has a copy now.
Yes, yeah. So he gives her all of these these gifts. So it's like they go on for, that's like pages of stuff he bequeaths to her, and then immediately attempts to take back.
It's also worth mentioning as well the repetition in these poems. And I sent you a link, Nick, and you should look on YouTube, viewers, for run a search. So Samuel Noah Kramer, we should probably mention as well. He co-wrote this book, but also just one of the major Assyriologists or Sumeriologists or Babyloniologists or whatever the fuck. Dead now. Lived quite a long time though, from 1897 to 1990.
Wow.
Jewish exile from somewhere around Russia way. Went to Philadelphia, I think.
Okay.
And he's who we have to thank for translating a lot of this stuff. And you can he recites I can't remember if it's one of the Inanna poems or not. And it's beautiful to hear, because even if you don't understand the language, you can hear the repetition.
Right.
And you can hear the poetry in it, right? You can
cool. Yeah, I would definitely like to hear that, actually, because that's the one thing obviously you don't get, is a sense of the original language. But I will say that that Diane Wolkstein has done a really good job, I think, of basically maybe cleaning up or making flow this
Yes.
this poetry, right? Like it reads very well. I also love this line. This is after Dad has sobered up. When the beer had gone out from the one who had drunk beer, which is an experience I think we've all had.
Yes. Yes.
When the beer had gone out from Father Enki, when the beer had gone out from the great god of wisdom, Enki looked about the Abzu, and then he suddenly realizes, shit, I gave all that stuff to my daughter.
And then if there's viewers who also watch our other YouTube videos, know that there's sometimes when the beer goes out and then someone else imbibes it again.
This is true. This is true.
From a warm beer can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she basically she gets all the gifts. Her dad isn't able to get them back from her, so that's good for her. It's kind of her story is sort of her coming into her powers in a way, and then a bit like Gilgamesh, and then realizing that sort of she loses to some degree. She's a young lady, and then she's not a young lady anymore, and she kind of has to deal with the repercussions, I guess.
Right.
But yes, all of this stuff about. As for me, the young woman, who will plow my vulva? Who will station the ox there? Who will plow my vulva? I read this to my wife, who was greatly amused.
Yeah, there's a load of vulva plowing.
Dumuzi replied, great lady, the king will plow your vulva. I, Dumuzi the king, will plow your vulva. Inanna, then plow my vulva, man of my heart. Plow my vulva.
It's worth considering as a new chat-up approach, maybe sidle up next to someone in a bar. So, vulva plowed recently? I don't know if you're interested. I offer a vulva plowing service. And then here's my business card.
Just when you think it can't get any more filthy, we get to the Inanna saying, he has sprouted. He has burgeoned. He is lettuce planted by the water. He is the one my womb loves best. My well-stocked garden of the plain, my barley growing high in its furrow, my apple tree which bears fruit up to its crown. He is lettuce planted by the water. My honey man sweetens me always. And then we get to the...
Have you ever read the... there's a really good translation, actually, by Robin Asquith. It's quite short. It just goes...
We should hop on before I get to all of the stuff about sweet milk. Make it thick.
Let's do it.
Inanna sang, make your milk sweet and thick, my bridegroom, my shepherd, I will drink your fresh milk. Wild bull Dumuzi, make your milk sweet and thick, I will drink your fresh milk. Let the milk of the goat flow in my sheepfold, fill my holy churn with honey cheese. Lord Dumuzi, I will drink your fresh milk.
Inanna has brought to you by Soft on Demand. Yes. Wow.
It's really quite. You can see the extent to which I enjoy this just by the sheer number of sticky pages.
Right.
Yeah.
I suppose this is what passes for pornography in the stuffy historian. This is the kind of thing that causes pince nez to fall off noses, right? And
I would think so. That section is outrageous, and it goes on and on and on for pages. And then you're right. There's the part where she kind of does a mirror story almost to Gilgamesh, where she goes into the underworld herself, and she's like, Inanna was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat, and hung from a hook on the wall. So we get gore at this point of the story as well. It goes Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then somebody has to go down into hell and kind of plead for her. And
it's got the violence, it's got the filth, it's the forced entry of its day.
Yes, yeah. No, it's amazing. This was to me a revelation. I thoroughly.
We should thank our partner in crime as well, Darren, for actually recommending this book to us.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. No, it's I've avoided talking about it a little bit just because, I'd like as much as I enjoyed this book, I would like to go a little bit deeper and have a little bit more context of Inanna within the constellation of other gods and deities, stuff like that. And
yeah, so I'd love to look and see if there is there a more comprehensive, like the myths and mythology of ancient Mesopotamia? Has somebody kind of collected together the various, I mean, you know, it's inevitably it'll have Gilgamesh in there, but like either sections of the original text, or even I mean, at this point I'll be happy with the children's, the Ladybird version, just to get some sort of a bigger picture of it all. Right.
Yes, but I think for now, I think we should regroup and lick our wounds and maybe have another bash at this after a few kind of huddled conversations back and forth. And if you have actually watched this through to the end, and I don't even think Gino will have done that.
Nope.
But if you have, I mean, we
salute you.
But also, don't you have anything better to do? Until next time, keep those vulvas plowed. Get down. Get